Hold on to your hats, dear readers, for we're diving headfirst into the tumultuous waters of the 19th century. This was an era unlike any other, a time when the world seemed to be spinning faster and the very fabric of society was being rewoven. From the cobbled streets of London to the burgeoning factories of Manchester, the landscape was changing at a dizzying pace. Cities were expanding, and the air was thick with the promise of progress and the smoke of industry. A new era was dawning, one that would redefine how people lived, worked, and thought. The sun rose over cities that were growing taller and more complex with each passing day. The old world, steeped in tradition and hierarchy, was being challenged by radical new ideas and inventions. The steam engine, the telegraph, and the spinning jenny were just a few of the innovations that were reshaping society. This was a time of immense change, and its echoes reverberate even today. The Industrial Revolution was not just a period of technological advancement, but a catalyst for social and economic transformation. Imagine a world on the cusp of transformation. The very essence of daily life was being altered, from the way people traveled to how they communicated and even how they perceived the world around them. The French Revolution had sent shockwaves across Europe, challenging the very foundations of power and authority. It was a time when the old regimes were being questioned, and new ideologies were taking root. The Enlightenment, with its emphasis on reason and progress, had ignited a thirst for knowledge and reform. Thinkers and scholars were pushing the boundaries of what was known and what could be achieved. Britain, at the heart of this maelstrom, was undergoing a metamorphosis of its own. The country was becoming a global powerhouse driven by its industrial might and colonial ambitions. The 19th century was a period of contradictions. It was an age where the gap between the rich and the poor was widening, even as opportunities for social mobility were emerging. It was an age of unprecedented prosperity and abject poverty, where the opulence of the Victorian elite stood in stark contrast to the squalor of the working class, of scientific advancement and social unrest. The same period that saw the birth of modern science also witnessed the rise of labor movements and demands for political reform. The old order was crumbling and a new one, uncertain and exciting, was struggling to be born. Architecture, art, and literature were all reflecting this dynamic tension between the past and the future. And what better way to understand this complex and dynamic period than through its prose? The literature of the time offers a rich tapestry of insights into the hopes, fears, and aspirations of a society in flux. For in the pages of essays, reviews, and journals, we find a window into the soul of a nation in flux. Writers and thinkers were grappling with the rapid changes around them, documenting their observations and critiques for future generations to ponder. Clang! The sound of metal on metal, the hiss of steam, the rhythmic churning of gears. These were the sounds of the Industrial Revolution. It was a symphony of progress, a cacophony that signaled the dawn of a new era. The age of handcraft was giving way to the age of machines, and the world would never be the same. Factories sprang up like mushrooms, drawing people from the countryside to the grime and grit of industrial cities. These burgeoning urban centers became the heartbeats of industrial activity, pulsating with the energy of countless workers who sought a better life. The promise of steady wages and the allure of modernity pulled them in, transforming sleepy villages into bustling metropolises almost overnight. This wasn't just a change in scenery, mind you. It was a seismic shift in the very fabric of society. The agrarian lifestyle that had dominated for centuries was being replaced by an industrial one. Families were uprooted, traditions were challenged, and a new way of life was being forged in the fires of industry. The Industrial Revolution, with its promise of progress and prosperity, also brought with it a host of social ills. The rapid pace of industrialization outstripped the ability of cities to cope, leading to overcrowded living conditions and inadequate infrastructure. The dream of a better life often turned into a harsh reality for many. Poverty, disease, and crime flourished in the overcrowded slums. The working class lived in squalor, packed into tiny, unsanitary tenements. Epidemics were common, and the lack of clean water and proper sanitation only exacerbated the situation. The streets were often filled with refuse, and the air was thick with the smoke of countless factories. The gap between the haves and the have-nots widened into a chasm, While the industrialists and factory owners amassed great wealth, the workers who toiled in their factories saw little of it. The stark contrast between the opulent mansions of the wealthy and the dilapidated tenements of the poor was a daily reminder of the inequalities that industrialization had wrought. But amidst the smoke and soot, a new class was emerging, the industrial working class. These were the men, women, and even children who labored long hours in factories and mines. Their lives were governed by the relentless rhythm of the machines, their days marked by the clanging of metal and the hiss of steam. They toiled in factories and mines, their lives governed by the relentless rhythm of the machines. The work was grueling and often dangerous, with little regard for the safety or well-being of the workers. Yet, despite the hardships, they formed the backbone of the new industrial economy. They were also a potent force for change, demanding better working conditions and a voice in government. Labor strikes and protests became more common as workers banded together to fight for their rights. The rise of labor unions gave them a platform to voice their grievances and push for reforms. This new industrial landscape, with its stark contrasts and simmering tensions, found its reflection in the literature of the time. Writers and poets grappled with the consequences of industrialization, using their works to explore the complex interplay of progress and poverty, innovation and inequality. Writers grappled with the consequences of industrialization, exploring themes of poverty, class conflict, and the dehumanizing effects of factory work. Their stories and poems captured the struggles and aspirations of the industrial age, providing a poignant commentary on the human cost of progress. The reform acts of the 19th century weren't just about ink on parchment, you see. They were about giving a voice to the voiceless, about shifting the balance of power ever so slightly towards the common man. The Great Reform Act of 1832, for instance, extended the vote to more men. Yes, sadly, women were still largely excluded, and paved the way for further reforms. These reforms were hard-won, believe you me, often met with fierce resistance from those who clung to the old ways. But they represented a growing recognition that the old order, based on privilege and exclusion, was untenable in a rapidly changing world. The struggle for reform was mirrored in the pages of newspapers, pamphlets, and periodicals. Writers, often from humble backgrounds themselves, used their pens as weapons to expose injustice, champion the rights of the working class, and advocate for social change. Think of it as a war of words, if you will, fought with wit, passion, and an unshakable belief in the power of ideas to shape a better future. Section 4. Reform and Revolution. The 19th century wasn't all about polite debates in Parliament, you know. It was a period marked by intense social and political turmoil, where the streets often became the battlegrounds for ideas and ideologies. It was a time of revolution and upheaval, of barricades erected in the streets and demands for radical change. People from all walks of life, driven by a desire for a better future, took to the streets to voice their discontent and aspirations. Across Europe, the old order was being challenged by popular uprisings, each with its own flavor and agenda. These movements were not just spontaneous outbursts, but were often led by charismatic leaders who inspired the masses with their vision of a new society. From the July Revolution in France to the revolutions of 1848 that swept across the continent, people were demanding greater freedom, equality, and representation. These revolutions were fueled by a growing awareness of social injustices and a collective yearning for democratic governance. These weren't isolated incidents, mind you, but part of a broader wave of change that was reshaping the political landscape of Europe. The interconnectedness of these movements highlighted a shared struggle against oppressive regimes and a common hope for a more just society. The spirit of revolution found its way into the literature of the time, often disguised as social commentary or thinly veiled allegory. Writers used their pens to critique the status quo, embedding revolutionary ideas within their works to inspire and mobilize their readers. Writers explored themes of rebellion, social justice, and the rights of individuals against oppressive systems. Their works became a powerful tool for spreading revolutionary ideas, reaching audiences far beyond the immediate circles of activists and intellectuals. It was a dangerous game, to be sure, for the authorities were quick to clamp down on any perceived threat to the established order. Censorship, arrests, and even executions were common, as governments sought to maintain control and suppress dissent. But the pen, as they say, is mightier than the sword. And writers continued to use their craft to challenge the status quo and inspire change. Their words resonated with the oppressed and the hopeful, fueling the fires of revolution and laying the groundwork for future generations to continue the fight for justice and equality. The printed word became a crucial medium for disseminating revolutionary ideas. Pamphlets, newspapers, and books circulated widely, often in secret, spreading the message of reform and revolution to every corner of society. Public gatherings and intellectual debates became hotbeds of revolutionary thought. In salons, coffee houses, and public squares, people discussed and debated the future of their nations, drawing inspiration from the written works that challenged the old order. Revolutionary leaders emerged from these discussions, rallying the people with their speeches and writings. They called for unity and solidarity, urging their fellow citizens to stand together against tyranny and fight for a brighter future. The 19th century was thus a time of profound transformation, where the seeds of modern democracy and social justice were sown. The struggles and sacrifices of that era laid the foundation for the rights and freedoms we cherish today, reminding us that the fight for a just society is an ongoing journey. Section 5. The power of the pen. The power of words. In the 19th century, with literacy rates on the rise, the written word took on a new significance. It was no longer the preserve of the elite, but a powerful tool for communication, education, and entertainment. Newspapers, with their serialized novels and sensationalistic headlines, became the lifeblood of the masses. Magazines and periodicals offered a platform for writers to share their views on a wide range of topics, from politics and science to literature and the arts. And then there were the novels, dear readers, those captivating tales that transported readers to different worlds and exposed them to new ideas. From the gritty realism of Charles Dickens to the biting satire of Jane Austen, novels held up a mirror to society, reflecting its virtues and vices, its hopes and anxieties. Through their characters and stories, novelists explored the complexities of human relationships, the challenges of modernity, and the enduring power of the human spirit.